Hello and welcome to The Exchange. I'm Diane Buckner. On tonight's show, what happened in financial markets this week was pretty ugly, but a U.S. artist is turning that into a thing of beauty and making thousands of dollars in the process. Plus, you can share rides, you can share rooms. Why not share helicopters? We'll tell you about a new service that's taking off. But first, that trip to the grocery store is becoming a lot more expensive for many Canadians. The cost of food in this country is going up fast, so much so it's making headlines around the world. And new numbers show those higher prices are starting to take a real bite out of our budgets. Statistics Canada reported today the country's inflation rate is at its highest level in more than a year. The cost of living went up 1.6% last month. Some of that had to do with shelter and transportation getting more expensive. Most of it, though, was driven by what we're spending at the grocery store. Food prices jumped 3.7% in December compared to a year earlier, more than twice the overall rate of inflation. The increase was sharper for food we have to import since the loonie is so low. Fresh vegetables cost 13% more than in 2014. Some say it's another sign that there is indeed a cauliflower crisis in Canada. Some restaurants have pulled cauliflower dishes from their menus since the price of the head has tripled in cost. To put that into perspective, 4 cauliflowers cost about the same as a barrel of oil. It's not just cauliflower. This grocery store in Edmonton shows celery at $5.49, peppers for as much as $8 a pound, almonds for almost $51 a kilogram. That price even came with a warning label. It looks like Canadians are cutting back as a result. According to BMO, higher food costs have some Canadians on an unintentional diet. Retail grocery store receipts rose a mere 0.9% year over year in October, implying an outright decline in volumes. What's extra frustrating to Canadians is the type of food going up in cost. It's all the healthy stuff. So, can we maintain a nutritious diet without breaking the bank? Sue Ma is a registered dietitian and president of Nutrition Solutions. So is that the case, Sue? Is it possible to have healthy food and it tastes all right too, but when you're really on a tighter budget?
Absolutely you can eat well on a budget, but it does take a little bit of planning ahead for sure. So I have many tips that I'd love to share with the viewers just to help them, eat well in these times where our loonie is sinking and the cost of vegetables are skyrocketing.
Yeah, I'm sure. So, yeah, is there certain things that we should be adding onto the shopping list that we might not be buying right now?
Well, cauliflower, $8 a head. Who can afford that? So one of my tips is to look for other vegetables and fruit that are maybe more economical and that can last a long time in your refrigerator. So some of my favorites are carrots. You can get carrots quite cheaply these days and they last weeks in your fridge. Apples are a good choice too. Sweet potatoes, squash, any of those, butternut squash, acorn squash, they can keep for a long time. Even a sack of potatoes will keep for a long time, and they're quite economical. But that leads me to another tip about buying vegetables, and that is try to buy the vegetables where you can actually choose what you need. So things like green beans or Brussels sprouts or mushrooms, that way you're not tied to buying a huge package which might go to waste, but you just buy the 10 or 20 mushrooms that you need or the 15 or 20 Brussels sprouts, and that way you can plan your meals around these ingredients that you actually have in your kitchen.
It's interesting that you mentioned waste a couple times, to make sure things don't go to waste. And actually, I did see there was a University of Guelph study released last year that said on average, a typical Canadian family is throwing away about $1,000 worth of food in a year, which of course is more than what prices are going up right now when we look at these latest inflation numbers. What are your suggestions in terms of not being so wasteful?
I mean, it's crazy, $1,000 a year. I mean, we could use that money and spend it on something more important. So another tip I have is to store your food properly. And one example is apples. If you store apples on the kitchen counter, then they ripen 10 times faster than if you were to store them in the refrigerator. So same thing with potatoes. Store them in a cool, dry area. Otherwise, they'll start to sprout. And of course, when they get bad, we tend to toss them out, and that's food waste. Another tip is to use frozen or canned vegetables and fruit. And I love frozen corn. I love frozen peas because you scoop out just the amount that you need for your recipe, and then everything goes back in the freezer and it stays fresh. The nutritional value of frozen frozen and canned is on par with fresh. The taste is a little different, I'll admit that, but you can save so much money and just use what you need and really reduce waste.
Yes, I saw actually one suggestion was even frozen strawberries. They're less expensive than fresh strawberries, and if you are just throwing them into a smoothie or something like that, then it's not such a bad idea.
Yes.
But now you also were talking about meal planning. I mean, how does that help in terms of reducing your bill at the grocery store?
Well, 2016 is the International Year of Pulses, and pulses include chickpeas, lentils, dried beans, dried peas, and we know these foods are super economical, amazing for nutrition. They're a meat alternative, great for protein and iron. So I just bought a big pack of green lentils, and it was $3, and I probably get 10 servings of meat alternatives. So that's 30 cents a serving for my protein, which is pretty good on these days when we have to be budget friendly. So when you plan your meals around these legumes, these pulses, lentils, and then use smaller portions of meat because meat tends to be a bit more expensive. You can also look for different cuts of meat, like the less popular ones, the chuck, for example, or stewing beef, which tends to be much less expensive than a sirloin or rib. So that way, what you can do is you can braise or stew these meats. That helps to tenderize them. You still get all of the nutrition, lots of flavor, but you'll save so much money.
I have a feeling that, with all this focus that we've had just over the last several weeks about, there's been a lot of news about the rising cost of food. And I would imagine people are starting to try and think about how much they are spending at the grocery store. I'm thinking about those coupons and sales that come along. I mean, is that something that you need to really be looking at on a regular basis?
Well, I love looking at grocery store flyers because it helps me plan my meals. So, for example, if eggs are on sale or if chicken thighs are on sale, then I'll plan my meals around that. Why not get a bargain when you can and it's a nutritious food? So, yes, definitely the grocery store flyers and coupons can help. Another part of the meal planning is to use your leftovers. So, if you've got something like, you've made some couscous or quinoa or rice. Think about different ways that you can reinvent this meal. One day you might want to have it in a stir fry, and next day you might want to put that rice or quinoa into a soup or a salad, and that way you use every little bit. Speaking of food waste, I also wanted to mention when it comes to vegetables, use every part of the vegetable that you can, from the root way up to the leaf. And my favorite vegetable these days is beets. So you can have the root, you can boil it or roast it, and then the leafy greens, you can do a little stir fry. So there's absolutely little waste when you're choosing vegetables like that.
All right. Well, thank you so much for all the suggestions, Sue.
Thank you, my pleasure.
After the break,